Hello everyone, may the 4th be with you. This is my little Star Wars nerd gift to you, an Annihilation Marauder guide, so let's jump right into it. Brief disclaimer as usual, I'm not an expert, I'm just a nerd that plays a lot of SWTOR, but if you have recommendations, things I missed, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. Help out your fellow players, I'm sure they would appreciate it. For your tertiary stats, 110% accuracy in PvE all the time. In PvP, you can kind of dump your accuracy, you don't really need it. Alacrity, 7.2% alacrity. That should compensate for most of your lag issues, and then throw everything else into crit. Crit is very important for us in managing our rage generation. It's very, very nice. For your tacticals, this guide will focus on the Spiteful Saber tactical. It will just increase the damage of your rend and cause it to refresh whenever you use a bunch of our primary abilities here. You can also use Malmanorial's Mask, or however you pronounce that mask, in PvP, or if you're AoE number farming. It's great for making massive AoE annihilates when you use Force Rend and then Annihilate. It's cool. It's great for number fluffing, but we won't be focusing on it. And then in ranked PvP, use to fell slice streams. If you're not, you're kind of throwing. For your legendaries, the non-negotiable one is Dispatcher's Package. Dispatcher's Package will will give you some auto crits after you use your dual saber throw. But the most important thing is that every time you critically hit with a weapon attack, you're going to generate 1 rage. That's very important for Annihilation. Annihilation right now without it is kind of like rage starved. You're kind of suffocating the entire time you're playing this bet. Just take Dispatcher. It's a whole lot easier. And you do more damage because of it. It's very, very nice. For your second legendary, Berserker's Call, technically the best in slot here. It's going to increase your damage by 5% every time you use Berserk. So all your damage increased by 5%. We love to see it. I've done some testing though, and frankly, Fearless Victor is about the same. It's like slightly worse, but if you have a Guardian and you're just testing out Annihilation, you can totally just slop in Fearless Victor here for Berserker's Call. It's about as good. It's 10% extra melee damage. So, 5% damage for everything, including your dots, or just 10% damage for your melee weapons. It's about the same, I'll be honest with you. Sometimes you'll parse higher in one, sometimes parse higher in the other. In theory, Berserker's is better, but if you're just like testing out the spec, you can totally play with Fearless Victor. I won't be offended. For a combat style here, we're going to be taking first Draining Center, which will make our Force Rend immediately build 10 Fury, which is important. We'll talk about that in a bit. And additionally, every time you have Berserk active and you use Force Rend will hit for like 40k. It's kind of ridiculous. It's an amazing little utility here that we get right at the beginning, which is very, very nice. Next, take Predation. It's just the best, hands down. I take Rupture and Rage here, which is going to give trauma every time that you use a Rupture on the target, which is going to reduce its healing. It's very nice. You can take Blood Wave if you're like AoE farming, but in single target situations, it's just not worth it as much. So totally usable if you want to. Next, you take Bleeding Center, which is going to mean that every time you critically hit with the bleeding effect, you will build 2 Fury, even during Berserk. It's just a great way to build more Fury. We'll talk about Fury in a little bit here, all right? Moving the line here, defensive role. It's just the most useful, hands down. Taking less AoE damage is very, very important, and it gives you that little 3% extra DR for internal elemental damage, so it's nice, beats both. Yeah. 64 here, this is kind of dealer's choice. Not in the good way, like these aren't fantastic. Blood Ward is kind of the default one here, but if you're doing a lot of AoE, you can totally use Path Carver, or if you're doing like questing content, you can totally use Cloak of Retribution. It's kind of up to you. Blood Ward is kind of the default though. Again, dealer's choice, but for all the right reasons here. Undying Rage is what I find to be the most useful. If you need the mobility, you can totally use Mad Dash, or if you like to have a stun, you can take Force Choke. You can take any of these. It's really up to you. Personally, I like the Undying Rage for the 99% damage reduction for 6 seconds. It's pretty good. It's pretty darn good. Finally, I take Thirst of Rage here, which means that Blood Rage is going to generate 12 Rage, and then you will heal for 1% of your maximum health every time you activate an ability that consumes Rage. This is pretty darn good. One of the reasons that Annihilation is so focused on, or is so requested in raiding right now, is because it actually does a lot of AoE healing, does a lot of raid healing. Just doing this rotation, you're going to be healing yourself for like 6k HPS. It's kind of ridiculous, and then you also do a whole bunch of raid healing as well. It's not uncommon for a good Annihilation Marauder to out-heal a standard story mode pug healer. Like, it's totally doable. You will heal a whole bunch. That's why the spec is so requested. Every time you use Berserk, you're going to be healing your entire group. It's great. It's great. So that is why we are so focused on having Annihilation Marauders in our groups. But what is Annihilation Marauder? Well, I'm glad you asked me. Annihilation Marauder is a builder spender spec. We have two resources that we want to be focusing on. The first is our Rage. Rage. If you look under your bar here, are these little yellow bubbles here. You see, as we use our less damaging abilities, we will slowly build these yellow bubbles, and then we will spend these yellow bubbles on our high damaging abilities. Our goal is to be floating in a relatively comfortable amount of yellow bubbles here to make sure that we are always able to use our high damaging abilities when we need to. We have a couple different ways of generating these little yellow bubbles of rage. The first is going to be with our Force Charge. It's going to be one of the most iconic abilities that the warrior has. It leaps to the target, gets close to it, and builds up 3 rage. It's a great way to start any fight to make sure that you have the rage to get going. That's the first way, Force Charge. Additionally, we have this great ability here called Battering Assault. Battering Assault will hit the target once. It has a little bit of a cooldown, but will generate 6 rage, which means that if you are running low, you hit Battering Assault, and boom, suddenly you will have a whole bunch of rage to deal with. Battering Assault is a great ability to get you out of a rage deficit. Additionally, we have this ability here called Force Rend. Force Rend is a dot. We'll talk about that in a second. It will instantly generate 4 rage. It's very nice. It's part of our rotation. It's a passive way that we will be generating a whole bunch of rage throughout this rotation. Finally, there are 2 ways that we are generating rage. The first is that as you passively do damage, every time you crit a bleeding target, we'll talk about bleeds in a second, you will generate 1 rage. That can happen once every 3 seconds. Additionally, all of our dots have a 20% chance to generate 1 rage. So if you have 3 dots in the target, every GCD, you're going to have like a 50% chance to generate a rage. So it's a little passive way to generate rage, but you kind of have to get lucky and hope that the spec works with you. It's a little bit of a roll of the dice. So sometimes you will run into a situation where you will run out of rage. That's okay. This is one of the rare specs where you can use Assault if you are completely out of rage. I will not be angry with you if you have to use Assault, especially when you're learning Annihilation here. We do have these great ways of actively building rage between Force Charge and between Battering Assault and between Force Rend, but because the spec is so hungry for rage all the time, sometimes you run into bad RNG, you don't crit enough, your dots aren't giving you the passive rage, you might run out of some. That's okay. If you ever run out, you can always use Assault for a GCD or 2, and then hopefully the extra passive generation abilities will come back up, or your more active rage generating abilities will come off of cooldown. So, one last time for you kids studying at home. Force Charge, Battering Assault, Force Rend, primary ways of generating rage. Passively, our dots ticking and critting will also be generating rage, and if you completely blotch it up or you get unlucky, you can totally use Assault. That's fine. Now let's talk about our dots. We have 3 dots that we really want to be paying attention to. The first is one that we've mentioned a couple times now, which is Force Rend. Force Rend will generate, 4 rage, which is pretty darn nice, and it will do 17,500 damage at the course of the next 9 seconds, and it will have a 12-second global cooldown. Now you're going to notice that the dot actually is a rare dot where it doesn't last as long as the rest, or as the cooldown does, so you're not going to have this on the target all the time. That's fine. We'll talk about how we're going to be applying this as often as possible and making the most of it with our stacks of berserk. So, as a general rule of thumb, Force Rend should be on cooldown pretty much all the time. It's going to slowly take damage over the course of the next 9 seconds. It doesn't do a whole bunch of damage, but it's nice. It's a way to passively generate rage, and with our berserk taking, it's going to be also healing us and be auto-critting all the time. So it actually does a surprisingly good amount of damage. Additionally, we have this ability here called Rupture. Rupture will stab the target for 7,000 damage and cause it to bleed for 13,000 damage at the course of the next 9 seconds. However, because of our tactical, every time you use a Vicious Slash or a Dual Saber Throw, Rupture's target or Rupture's duration will be refreshed. This means that Rupture will be used once at the beginning of the fight, and then hopefully you never let it fall off again because you'll just be spamming those fat vicious slashes into the target and then ticking its damage and then keeping on the target at all times. Then you never have to worry about it again. It's a very, very nice way for us to be keeping that passive dot damage on the target at all times by using Vicious Slash, Dual Saber Throw, or Vicious Throw when the target's below 30% health. So, those are the kind of like the dummy default dots, right? You hit the ability and then the dot goes on the target, Force Rend and Rupture. Pretty straightforward damage over time abilities. The one that's a little confusing to most people, or to some people that are new to learning this spec, is this ability here called Deadly Saber. Deadly Saber is a dot. However, it's kind of a unique dot, in that it doesn't instantly apply damage to the target. Instead, once you use Deadly Saber, you're going to get these 3 stacks of Deadly Saber. And now every time you use a melee attack on the target, you can see here you're going to slowly build up to 3 stacks of bleeding Deadly Saber on the target, which will slowly increase its damage over time. So every time you use a melee attack after you're activating your Deadly Saber, you will slowly build up to those 3 stacks on the target. So for example, use Deadly Saber once, I have 3 stacks of Deadly Saber, and now 1 attack, 1 bleeding, 2 attacks, 2 bleeding, 3 attacks, 3 bleeding. Now it's going to do a whole bunch of damage to the target over the course of the next 6 seconds or so. So it is a great way to apply more bleeds to the target very, very quickly while just passively doing melee damage. So wrapping up real quickly our dot section. 3 dots. Force Rend. Builds Rage. Very nice. Rupture. On the target. Will be auto-reticking all the time. Deadly Saber is a buff you give yourself, and then every time you attack the target, it'll slowly build all 3 of those stacks onto the target until it finally does a whole bunch of extra damage there at the end. You're going to notice that a couple things are happening here. For one, we are slowly building these stacks of Fury. You build Furious stacks by doing a couple things, either critting because of our utility here. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Boop, 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 boop. Because of our bleeding center, critically hitting with periodic bleed damage will build to Fury. So every time your dots tick, it's going to build to Fury. And every time you spend Rage, you're also going to build these stacks of Fury. When you hit 30 stacks of Fury, you're going to notice that your Berserk is going to start to glow. There is a set spot that we're going to use our Berserk in this, but we just want to understand the fundamentals of what's happening here. When you use your Berserk, you're going to increase the critical chance of all your bleed effects to 100%. So all of your bleeds are going to auto-crit all the time. It's awesome. Additionally, every time you deal bleed damage, everyone in your raid group will heal for 1% of their max health. This lasts for about 6 global cooldowns. It's very, very nice. It's very, very nice. It will be ticking your entire raid heals for your entire raid group for 3% of their health, because you're going to have 3 dots in the target very, very rapidly over and over and over and over and over again. It's very, very nice. It's a lovely ability, and it's why we have all these beautiful auto crits. So I just lost the 30 stacks. That's a shame. All right. So how this is going to look is that when you have your bleeds on the target, you have your bleeds on the target. All right, now we have 2 stacks on the target. If we use Berserk, I then into Force Rend, and now you're gonna see here, oh, I'm healing. It's lovely. All my dots are critting, It's lovely. Now the stacks actually wear off relatively quickly here. So it doesn't actually last for like 6 global cooldowns. It lasts for a good long while, but it's a very quick way to make sure that you are dealing a whole bunch of dot damage very quickly. So if you see here, we can try to watch the stacks real quick. So dots from the target, you can see my stacks of Berserk are going away. All my healing has happened. All my crits have happened. It's very, very nice. Additionally, just relating to Berserk real quick, remember we have Draining Center here, which means that every time you use Force Rend during Berserk, it's going to deal 4 times this initial damage. So if you look right now, the initial damage on Force Rend is like 7k. It's not that impressive. However, when we have Berserk active, let me see real quick. All right, Berserk, you're gonna notice that the Force Rend damage is gonna auto crit for like 43,000 damage. That's a lot of damage. So one thing we're going to be doing as we go throughout this rotation is we're going to be using Berserk right before we use our Force Rend to make sure that we are hitting that monster 43,000 damage crit with our opening of Force Rend. Essentially, Berserk, big crits on dots, heal raid team, hit glowing button. Brr, okay? Now, let's talk about our filler abilities here. We've talked about a lot so far. Like, I get, we're 15 minutes into this video. There's a lot to talk about. We're going to blow through this relatively quickly because it's kind of straightforward. So, every time you use your Annihilate, Annihilate's your primary filler ability here. All right? It does like 30,000 damage. It's pretty great. Every time you use Annihilate, you're going to get these stacks of Annihilator, which is going to lower the cooldown of Annihilate. Essentially, the more you use Annihilate, the faster you can use Annihilate. So, for example, now if I use Annihilate again, I have 4 stacks of Annihilator, which means that the cooldown of Annihilate is down to like 8.4 seconds. So, it's a great, monstrous damaging ability. We love to see it. Once you have these 4 stacks of Annihilator, you have the cooldown as low as it possibly can be. So we want to be using Annihilate as much as possible. Additionally, when we deal dot damage to the target, there is a chance that your dual saber throw is going to start to glow. This is because your bleed effects have a 20% chance to grant pulverize, which is going to increase the damage of your next dual saber throw by 100%. So every time your dual saber throw is glowing, your dual saber throw is obviously free. It is a 30-meter range target, or a 30-meter ranged ability. Anytime it's glowing, it's going to do a bunch of extra damage, which is very, very nice. But it can only be activated once every 18 seconds. So basically, glowing dual saber throw, very, very nice. Additionally, we have this ability here called Ravage. Now, Ravage does not consume any rage, which is very nice for a spec that is very rage starved. We want to be using Ravage pretty much as often as possible. It's a great little ability. It hits the target, boop, 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 boop. Doesn't have the same animation that it used to, but that's okay. It's free damage, which is very, very nice in this spec. We kind of want to be prioritizing this as well because, frankly, we are so rage starved throughout this entire rotation. It's nice to have a global cooldown where you give your passives a chance to kind of catch up and generate some of that rage for us instead of us trying to just like suck down rage all the time. Our main filler ability though is going to be our Vicious Slash. Vicious Slash does, 13,000 damage. It's okay, but what it's really doing is it's ticking the damage of Rupture and it's keeping Rupture on the target at all times. Rupture, having it on the target, very, very important in this spec. We don't really want to be thinking about Rupture after we used it once. So if you could be basically spamming Vicious Slash all the time, that's kind of what you want to be doing in this spec. It's going to be taking that Rupture damage, making sure it's on the target, and it's just a great little filler ability. So there's going to be a couple times when your Annihilate, your Ravage, and your Dual Saber Throw are all on cooldowns where you're just going to have to spam Vicious Slash over and over and over again. It's going to be a nightmare. We have another filler ability here that's only usable below 30% health called Vicious Throw. It does like 21,000 damage. It refreshes the damage of Rupture. It's basically just a replacement for your Vicious Slash, except it's only usable during Execute phase, which is very nice. Additionally, our dot's going to be doing a whole bunch more damage during Execute phase, so it's free damage, all right? What I've done here is I have organized the priority tree in this little bar here. So just looking from the top, moving on down. When you enter the filler section of the rotation, you're just going to be taking a look at this little tree here. So Annihilate is the most important. Dual Saber Throw when it's glowing is second most important. Vicious Throw when under 30%. Third most important. Ravage fourth. Vicious Slash fifth. And then manage your rage with Battering Assault and Assault as necessary. If you get below like 3 or 4 rage, I like to use Battering Assault and just like prevent the problem. It's kind of, you just have to get a feel for it. So, I've been talking a lot here. Let's recap real quick, then we'll talk about our rotation. All right? Generate Rage through Force Charge. Generate Rage through Force Rend. Generate Rage through Battering Assault. If things go terribly wrong, use your Assault. We have 3 dots that we're primarily focusing on. The Force is going to be our Force Rend, which is going to do a whole bunch more damage when we have Berserk up. Rupture is going to be refreshing all the time. All right? It's never going to fall off. You're going to use it once and then you're going to use it again. Deadly Saber. You use it, gives you 3 stacks, hit the target 3 times with melee abilities, or with any ability, and it will slowly build these 3 stacks to slowly be doing damage. Berserk. Activate it. Crits. All your dots all the time. Heal your raid team. People love you for this. Finally, our primary filler abilities, moving down from top to bottom. Annihilate, glowing dual saber throw when it's glowing, vicious throw when it's available, ravage, and then vicious slash spam whenever possible. I know I've thrown a lot at you here, but there is good news. Here it is. If you can count to 8, you can play Annihilation. All right? All right? Trust me. Here's how this is going to go. All right? On 1, you're gonna count your abilities out one by one. All right? You're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is going to blow your mind. 6, crazy. 7, 8. All right. On 1, you're going to use Deadly Saber. All right. On 1, Deadly Saber. 2, 3. I fucked it up. I'm not going to start the recording all over again. On 1, you use your Deadly Saber in conjunction with a melee ability. On 2, you fill. And then you use Berserk. Berserk into Force Rend. And now you just follow your basic priority filler here. All right? So let me say that again, because I botched it the first time. For that, I do apologize. All right? So on 1, okay, now I can't evade the target. Cool. On 1, use Deadly Saber with an ability. 2, you fill. And then going into 3, you'll hit Berserk into Force Rend. And now we just fill, baby. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1 is Deadly Saber with an ability. 2, Berserk into Force Rend for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now we ran out of rage. Here, which is fine. Just use your rage generator. You're totally fine. Back to the beginning. 1 is Deadly Saber with an ability. 2 is a filler. 3, we go Berserk into Force Rend. Fill. 5, 6, 7, 8. 1 Deadly Saber with an ability. 2, Berserk into Force Rend for 3. Berserk, Force Rend 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Deadly 1, 2, Berserk, Rend for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And Deadly 1, 2, Berserk into Rend for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1 Deadly Saber. 2 Berserk into Rend for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 1, 2 Berserk Rend. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 1, 2 Berserk Rend. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's that simple. Just Deadly Saber on 1, Berserk into Rend for 3, and then follow this basic priority system for 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, a couple notes here. Annihilation is surprisingly forgiving as a spec. I know it looks confusing, there's a lot going on, but as long as you maintain your Rupture on the target and you're using your Deadly Saber on 1 and then Berserk into Rend on 3, the filler abilities are important, and min-maxing those is, it's going to help you do like top damage, but it's a pretty forgiving spec. if you go a single, say I'm going into 5-6, and I have both my Annihilate and my Ravage available, and if I use Ravage first, it's so bad. No, it's not. Like, it's fine. Just do better next GCD. The beauty of these priority systems is that you don't have to memorize it and be perfect at it for the system to work. You just get better at understanding when to use the priority system. And there's not a lot of wonky interactions with this. You literally kind of just follow down the primary tree here of Annihilate, Dual Saber Throw, Vicious Throw, Ravage, and then spam Vicious Slash, and then juggling Battering Assault and Assaults in there when you need that extra bit of rage. And then you're kind of good to go. It's a pretty straightforward spec, does a whole bunch of damage. Let's talk about our basic opener really quickly. You can open with Charge into Bloodthirst, into Frenzy, and then get this whole thing going. I'll link the top parse or some of the top parses right here to make sure that, like, if you really want to see when to be using your Bloodthirst, I'll show you where you can. But it's really not necessary. Bloodthirst is more, you kind of let your raid team get in there first, then you can pop your Bloodthirst, and then you use your Frenzy to make up for the extra rage. Your raid lead will call for your Bloodthirst. Don't you really worry about it. So, I didn't mention this before. When you use a regen, you're going to slowly build up to 30 stacks of Frenzy. It's pretty straightforward. So, basic opener here is going to be jumping in, and then using Deadly Saber, then Battering Assault, Annihilate, Berserk, Force Rend, Rupture. So what we're doing here is we are generating a whole bunch of rage, because this is kind of a rage starved spec. We are getting Deadly Saber up on the target. We are using that Annihilate to get the cooldown and Annihilate taking faster and faster, using Berserk to get the auto crit on Force Rend, and then going into Rupture. So let's take a look at it real quick. Charge into Deadly Saber, Battering Assault, Annihilate, Berserk, Force Rend, Rupture, and now just follow your basic priority system until you wrap around to the beginning, and you should be ready to rock and roll. One last time here. 1, 2, Berserk into Force Rend for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and Deadly Saber for 1, 2, Berserk into Rend for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It looks intimidating. There's a lot happening here, but once you get into it and you understand where to put your Deadly Saber, where to put your Berserk, where to put your Force Rend, this spec is pretty surprisingly dummy easy, despite having a lot of mechanics. It takes a whopping 27 minutes to explain it. Let's quickly talk about defensive cooldowns here. Our main defensive is going to be your Saber Ward, which is going to increase your range and melee defenses by 50% and absorb 25% of the damage taken. It's pretty nice. We also have this ability here called Force Camouflage, which is going to cleanse effects if possible. It will reduce your threat towards enemies and reduce all damage taken by 50%. It's great. It's a little mini stealth that Marauders get. We also can provide that with Predation to give us a whole massive movement speed boost. It's very, very nice. Personally, I like Undying Rage here. Some people take Mad Dash. You can read those descriptions as you see fit. One thing we need to talk about real quick is that you can use your Smash to spread your dots. So essentially in any filler slot. So you know how we talked about, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 all being filler slots. If you use your Smash, it'll spread your dots to all targets in the area. It's pretty darn nice. Finally, we have our Cloak of Pain here. Cloak of Pain will reduce your damage taken by 20%. It also kind of like zap the target for 2.5k damage. So not great, not terrible. It'll additionally refresh every time you're attacked. So it's a base 10 seconds, but every time you're attacked, the duration gets refreshed up to 30 seconds long. It's pretty darn nice. It's a great way to fluff. Now, don't tell your heroes you're doing this, but you can totally pop Cloak of Pain and then go like stand and stuff and then like do that little extra bit of passive damage. So that healing sounds like a them problem, but you're also healing because you're Annihilation Marauder. So, you're kind of solving the problem that you're making, but just don't tell your heroes you're doing it, otherwise they'll yell at you. I think that's everything. This is a monstrous video. I'm so sorry. So, may the 4th be with you. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. But that's all I have. Take care now. Hold up. I need to get Duke in here. Hold up. He's sleeping. There he is. There's the boy. There's the baby. So, if you love Duke, you can like and subscribe. You know, support his hopes and dreams of one day becoming the world's greatest SWTOR content creator. But for now, he sleeps. Okay, goodbye.